They rewrote the story, erased the names, buried the wisdom, but the truth still lives in our blood. This is not just history. This is what they tried to hide, and what your soul never forgot. You were never lost. They just buried the map. If you start our story with slavery, you erase everything that came before. And if we forget what came before, we forget who we truly are. Before the boats, before the whips, before the lies, there was Africa. Vast, thriving, organized, spiritual, and sovereign. Not a dark continent, but a lit one. Great civilizations, Kemet, Nubia, and Kush, Mali Empire, Great Zimbabwe, Benin, and Ife. These were nations with universities, trade, sacred law, and divine governance. Africans built pyramids, studied the stars, healed with herbs, and remembered their ancestors. Yes, but not like what Europe created. African servitude was temporary, not racial. It was integrated, not dehumanizing. It was governed by ancestral laws and shame codes. Europe created chattel slavery, where Africans were treated as property for life. So the Portuguese, way back in 1444, were actually the first to kick off the transatlantic slave trade, and they did it with the blessing of Catholic papal bulls like Dum Diversas. After them, Spain, Britain, France, the Netherlands, and Denmark all followed suit. They built these massive industries, all centered around trafficking human bodies. At the heart of it, there were a few driving forces. First, it was all about wealth. Sugar, cotton, gold, you name it. Second, they wanted land, looking to expand their empires as far as possible. And third, there was this idea of spiritual conquest, trying to erase our memory and our connection to the divine. This was spiritual warfare, not just economic conquest. So, who actually profited from all of this? Well, it was European royals, the Catholic Church, big banks like Lloyd's and Barclays, even universities like Harvard and Yale, and insurance companies. And, African collaborators were eventually betrayed and colonized too. So they used Psalm 51 verse 5 to justify this idea of inherited guilt. But honestly, this whole concept really came from Augustine of Hippo back in the 4th century. It didn't come from African wisdom at all. African spirituality teaches that you are born divine, not sinful. The story of Eden was actually stolen and flipped around to make you fear your own power. You were not born broken. You were born divine. Stand in the mirror and declare, I'm not cursed. I'm not guilty. I am the living breath of my ancestors. This right here is the breaking of the spell. The remembering begins here. Before they called it the Dark Continent, it was the light of the world. Africa is not just the birthplace of humanity. It is the birthplace of science, spiritual law, language, and civilization. Before Europe had castles, Africa had temples aligned with stars, mathematical calendars, and sacred systems of initiation. There were no prisons, no police. Law was spiritual, enforced through Ma'at, Ori, and ancestral codes. Kemet, also known as Ancient Egypt, was built on Ma'at, truth, justice, harmony, and reciprocity. Spiritual science governed medicine, law, and leadership. Women could be pharaohs and temple initiates. Kemet gave the world the 365-day calendar, geometry, medicine, and divine feminine theology. So, let's talk about Nubia and Kush. These ancient civilizations actually came before Egypt, and believe it or not, they built more than 200 pyramids. They were the origin of the pharaonic line, a truly powerful Black kingdom. Now, moving on to the Mali Empire, Timbuktu was home to one of the world's very first universities, which is just amazing. And then there's Mansa Musa, who is often considered the wealthiest human in all of history. Next up is the Songhai Empire. They were known for their advanced trade networks and law schools, and they really blended Islamic and African scholarship in a way that was totally unique and ahead of their time. Great Zimbabwe, was a place of stone cities built with incredible skill and intention. These structures weren't just homes, but reflected astronomical alignment and, interestingly, a society where female lineage held real authority. Ife and the Benin kingdoms, wow, they were centers of sacred bronze art and spiritual kingship. Their leaders were seen as divine, and their understanding of astronomy was woven into their culture and daily life. Ifa, for example, is a wisdom tradition with 256 sacred Odu, each guiding us to align with our Ori, or inner divinity. Through herbs, offerings, and oral codes, people seek harmony and guidance. Then there's Maat, which is all about the 42 laws of balance and the idea that, in the end, our hearts are judged by their weight. And of course, ancestor reverence, dreams, signs, and offerings remind us that our ancestors are still with us, guiding us each day. So, rites of passage have always played a big role in shaping identity and community values. Herbal medicine, passed down through generations, has been like a cornerstone of healing and wisdom. And honestly, women have long stood as spiritual leaders, guiding their people with strength and insight. Our original sense of time was, really based on menstrual cycles and the phases of the moon. But then the Gregorian calendar came along and, replaced this natural way of marking time. Across the continent, there are more than 2,000 languages, and in so many of them, there's actually no word for hell or sin. Instead, knowledge was passed down through griots, through music, and the steady rhythm of memory. We lived in balance, honored the earth, and knew divinity long before colonizers arrived. Pour libation, speak, I call upon the ancestors. Let the map unfold within me. Let the remembering begin.